Saying figure hard.
Yeah, we can't do that because then they.
We should have a
Because
document.
I'm only seeing it, because I'm like looking here now, like, the 3/4 ton that I bought for 2022. If you go out to 2034. There's a $70,000 number there. I don't think you buy that truck for $70,000 in 10 years.
Not in 10 years, but again, the plan says it's in current year dollars, that is one of the two generally accepted ways of forecasting, which is to use either current dollars or future inflation, and you're guessing about future inflation.
Right.
Again, I suggest we not revisit the decision again. We spent 2 or 3 meetings discussing it, March, April, May. Where we ended up was where we've been for the last 3 months now, which is a current year dollar plan.
I still think it's flawed. I just wanna put my opinion out there. But
I,
we can move on.
okay, I understand. My opinion is, I think it, especially in this, at this late in the cycle, we should stick with what we have. However, the quote in hand is only, if it's only a 30-day quote, it gives us some evidence to believe that it won't be 350
Right.
as we have.
I do agree with
More likely be closer to 300. Jeff, would you please add how long, if you will hold this quote until, I guess if March would be the meeting in which it would be approved?
Yeah.
So ask him if he could hold this price till March, and if you could let Kerry know that soon as we know, suppose Bob gets the answer that this 275 and a half will hold till March. We could put 275 and a half in plan.
Okay.
Right? If it won't hold, then all we can do is our best guess, which is what Jack just suggested. Estimate that in the next 6 months, it could go up as much as 10% and put in 300, which is better than 350 for every one of the trucks, right?
Because the issue these days is, it's very difficult for a dealer, a mere dealer, to guarantee the stability of price. Back at the factory, from the suppliers around the country and around the world.
Right.
And that's been what I've run into, at least for the last $5 million worth of capital purchases where vehicles is everybody's got some volatility that they can't control.
Understood,
So,
understood.
That's the difference.
So if you could do that, that'd be great. That would help us a lot with being a little more specific on the plan. For the first year in the plan, okay. While we're on dump trucks, if I could ask a question. Bob, could you tell us again, and I believe that in the plan, you're suggesting we go from 6-wheel dump trucks to 10-wheel dump
Yeah.
trucks. And you mentioned briefly your reason for that last time. Do you mind repeating
So-
that, and helping us understand that?
The cost difference is very low. The gain is better. You're burning less fuel, but you're hauling more material at one shot. So a 6-wheeler versus a 10-wheeler, it's 2 to 1. So for every load of material we haul with 10-wheeler, we have to haul 2 with the 6-wheeler. They do less damage to the road, 10-wheeler does.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
Because of the more wheels.
Yeah, more wheels.
Even fully loaded, because the weight is distributed over.
Over all those wheels.
So think about this, a bulldozer is extremely heavy, right?
Yeah,
The bulldozer has less pounds per square inch than a 6-wheel dump truck.
then a 6-wheeler. Okay, keep on without.
So you burn less fuel. There's less nose dive. So a 6-wheeler is just like your single twin axle vehicle.
Right, right.
And you hit the brakes or whatever, it always shifts forward.
Yeah,
With a 10-wheeler, because it's longer, it's balanced, there's a little more flow, so you have less damage to your frame. Burn less fuel, there's better resale value. Better traction.
Okay.
All year long, because you can walk in 8 tires instead of 4.
right.
It's for the cost difference, the pros outweigh the con. The only con is the cost of it.
Well, all good reasons, and I was gonna say, you say the cost difference is not much.
It's
How much is it? What is the cost?
$15,000 to $18,000.
16 to 18, okay. Sounds like a reasonable approach to me. I was curious about what is the cost difference in what it would.
In the tires last longer on the 10. Rear tires, so you're not replacing tires as much.
Right.
Less running.
Right.
You're making less trips back to your pit.
Okay.
So, for example, North Canyon, my guy runs out of sand up in North Canyon, for him to come all the way back to our pit in his 6-wheeler, to get loaded up and get back there, to do one more load, it's an hour and a half turnaround.
Yeah, of course it is, yeah.
If he goes up there on the 10-wheeler, he's not making that trip.
So besides the fuel that you mentioned in what, you know, when Trevor said it too, less fuel. That sounds like it's more efficiency for the labor hours in the department, correct?
It's
Like
gonna
you
be
just
more,
said, the 2 hours is, you know,
yeah,
you
it's
just saved the guy, you know.
you know, where we could, instead of taking 6 hours to get to town, open, we could possibly be closer to 4.
That's what I'm saying, so, what I wanna link that to is this other issue
So
where
it creates
we need more road maintenance in town. You know,
But
does
it,
this help in that regard?
oh, it does, because it will, the guys are out on the road less.
It will have the same crew with the same number of pieces of equipment, do a little bit more maintenance.
Right.
Yeah, is that right?
What do you mean by a little bit more? Maybe?
Maintain more miles of road each year, because they have a little more time.
We're just
More
more
efficient, because you're more efficient, you can
Yes.
do more, right?
correct.
Ellie?
Yeah, a couple of questions, while we got Bob here. So do you think, since you save labor, especially since you have a hard time finding help, that
I hear you.
Yeah.
would that be enough to make up the difference in the price of the truck, what we save on labor?
What you're gonna save on fuel.
Yeah,
Fuel and labor both.
guys?
Yeah, well, just, I mean, just the price of tires alone, I mean, and you'll gain on resale in 7 years. That truck will be,
Resale too. Yeah,
will be.
yeah.
Ten wheelers we have now, I can only find two.
That's what we have.
Two, we used to have
Two and four.
so these are the, and your preference is for freight liners?
Probably Western Star.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
because years ago, Chris Dennis not there anymore, but Eddie Dale, if I remember correctly, had freight liners and what, we had two of them, they lasted, one of them lasted us like 20 years.
So nothing's built like it was.
Yeah.
One, two, right now, Western Star Freightliner. The nicer thing about a Western Star versus a Freightliner is the wiring, and the resale that.
Okay.
In the truck world and what we do, the Freightliner is considered a throwaway truck.
Oh, really?
Yeah. the Western Star.
Okay, so,
It's, well, and at the end of the day, it's just a cab and line. That's the only thing that's different, the chassis, the motor, the rear end, that's all the same.
So I know I don't have the spreadsheet, so how many, so you want to replace them, become time to replace the 6 wheelers?
I'd like to get two more and really, for the
Okay, so you want 5 altogether?
4,
4, okay.
at least.
at least 4, if not,
Yeah.
does it make sense, Bob, excuse me, Ellie, would it make sense perhaps to go to 4 10-wheelers and 2 6? You still have a reasonable, efficient use for 6-wheel dump truck.
Yes, I do, and
All right.
that's my plan.
4 and 2 would be better than all 6 10-wheelers.
Yes, because I mean, we have some pretty long routes, my big long routes, I can put the 10-wheelers on.
Yeah.
And then we got some short ones
Alright.
and,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have to do it.
So if I may,
yeah,
to the committee, we've asked Bob to explain his thoughts in this regard. I personally agree. I think what Bob described is a good scenario. What do the other members of the committee think?
what's the issue?
The question is to replace. We used to say if it was a 6-wheel dump truck, we would replace it with a new 6-wheeler. Bob's saying in at least 2 cases, he would like to take what today is an old 6-wheeler and replace it with a 10-wheeler. Pay a little bit more money, but for the good reasons he described.
1 truck, 2 trucks, 3 trucks.
Same number of trucks, just replace the 6-wheeler with a
How many
10-wheeler.
are we talking about? 1?
Oh, I'm sorry, Bob's suggesting going from the current situation of 2 10-wheelers and 4 6-wheelers, right? To 4 10-wheelers and 2 6-wheelers. So an increase from 6 to 10 on 2 trucks
Yes.
is what Bob's suggesting. So,
I'm
what
on
what
board.
does the
I'm
committee
on
think?
board.
Me too.
Just need
What
to
do you
know
think?
what we're doing.
Sound good to you, Sandy?
Same CDL licensing.
Yeah, that is a change.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, yeah, sounds like a good plan. Okay, good.
So, one of my 6-wheelers is another CDL truck. So with that being said, I will replace that with a non-CDL truck as well, because we can't guarantee that we can hire somebody with CDL.
Okay.
And it's so,
Only one is like that, huh? That's interesting.
yeah, I have, it's one I bought, I mean, it's been a great little truck. But it allows us, if we have some non-CDL trucks and in the world that we live in.
Yeah,
It's, they're what they're called D-rated trucks. So it's just from the manufacturer. They stamp the door that says it's not over 26,000, when actually it's a 35,000.
what has to do with the gross vehicle weight or whatever, yeah,
Right.
yeah, okay.
But it allows us to hire an employee that doesn't have a CDL for less money per hour and still put them in a decent size.
And maybe that employee over time gets trained and gets
Right.
the CDL, all right, got it. Now,
They had it one time and AP did it. And
Yeah,
it cost
right.
money because my lawn didn't get dug up.
Hey, I didn't have to really plow your area.
okay,
Coming.
okay, so we need, if we can move on a little bit,
Does that mean the 350s get reduced to 300?
at least to 300, as you suggested, maybe to 275 for next year. What? The 350,000 estimate that's on the spreadsheet for dump trucks. Jeff, me asking
All of
that.
them get reduced to 300.
I'd say they all get reduced to 300. Then the next year's one, maybe 275, if Bob is successful at getting him to agree to hold the price till March. Right?
This is a price per heat, so you want this is.
Oh, yeah.
price per heat, so we want for it.
Oh, yeah,
We would, well, all my. If it's gonna, yeah, so we'd want three, because I'm gonna keep one 6-wheeler. I'm actually keeping a 6-wheeler as a backup, I'm not. Because we don't have a backup truck at all. So I wanna do 3 10-wheelers and 3 6-wheelers, 1 6-wheeler, 4 6-wheelers.
and are you saying that the next time down the road, the next 6 wheeler comes up with replacement that? Roughly to 10? Because now you're saying 3 and 3 a few minutes ago, you said 4 and 2.
No, so
I just, what I wanna try to do is make sure that
Carry in the
clear
for the plan, yeah.
on which vehicles have the correct number and what the mix is.
And I'm with you. So again, I have that thought. Now we're saying 3 and 3. 5 minutes ago, you were saying 4 and 2. So let's start by that piece
so
to lead it.
total, I'd like to have. Which I think would make sense if we did 2 6-wheelers.
There you go.
And 4 10.
And stay, and stay, when you get to that point. It may not be all at first, in the near term, okay, got it.
Yep.
So we're heading for 4 and 2, but in the short term, it'll be 3 and 3. And then you might migrate one more after that, is that correct?
Yeah.
Having said that, to Jack's point for carrying in, so the number for next year for the first one, the second priority. Will go from 350 if Bob gets the dealer to hold the price to 275, right, Carrie Ann? And then the other 350 will all go to 300. Based on this quote, thinking the 350 was a bit of an overstatement. Is that all right?
Yeah.
That answer your question?
I think it does, and the other thing I want to be clear about is. If we did the lease. I know we haven't got that yet. We'll be buying more vehicles under the lease. Than with the purchase, because of the price of it, that's right. If we do the purchase, I only see 1 10-wheel done.
Yeah.
And if I look at the lease, we're
Well, I was gonna ask about
And
that
we'll
in a couple
down.
minutes, right. I hear you.
again.
I think when we go to the option, that's a question I have. Okay. On the next sheet, yes, thank you, but I like to defer that just for a couple minutes. Staying on the purchase option page. Do we have quotes for the 1 ton, 150,000 estimate, and for the grader at 321,000? I'm in the process of getting those.
I've already given the quotes for the grader. That'll have them on.
Oh, you did? You don't have to have it on you. You didn't
I'm
provide.
waiting for a quote on the 1 ton.
Okay, good. So the three.
I think that's gonna go up though. I think they're gonna be pushing 160.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, on the one you provided, you said the greater than 3, it's in here at 321, is that based on that quote?
I don't.
Yes, we do
Okay,
get
good.
quote for the backhoe and the grader.
Okay,
So those
good,
numbers, they're quoted.
good, excellent, thank you. And I understand if whatever the quote comes in at, it comes in at, that's what we put for the first year.
Correct.
Okay, and then my only other question on this page, on the purchase option page is, I see a six-wheel dump truck that says it's a year in service of 2019. And it's going to be replaced in 2028. All right, I guess that's the one, 2019.
What are you looking at?
I'll get you there in a second, then make sure I'm not reading it wrong.
If some of the plows I had to, or some of the dump trucks I had to push out because we didn't want to buy two dump trucks in the same year.
In the same year, right. So the one I'm talking about, Bob, is Western Star number 6. It says was in service 2019, right? Let me look at the lease options. There's I'm sorry, but I'm leading up to a question here.
2021. Yeah, it's about 8 years old.
Right, okay, so,
We're trying to get.
oh, that wasn't my question, I'm sorry.
All right,
The one line above that. My question is about the
2015.
international six-wheel dump truck that's year in service 2015.
Yeah,
On the lease page, and maybe even on this page, you don't start replacing that till 2028, which means it will be 13 years old. That doesn't seem to make sense. I wanted to ask about that.
so. Guy and I were talking about that this morning, which one to keep between, because we're keeping one of the six wheels. So we're
Gotcha.
upgrading
I
it.
heard that, yeah.
So we don't know if it's gonna be number 8 or that other one. Cause that 2015 one is, number 8 to 20.
We're talking number 5 and number 6 here, aren't we?
We're talking number 5,
Number 5 is 2015, okay.
and we're talking number.
Oh, number 8 is 2017. Okay, so you're tossing up between those two.
To keep it the backup truck.
Right. So at any rate, you need to be sure that the right number is in.
And we are sure.
Carry in
We're
plan.
gonna get with Terry Ann and Jack after this.
You can swap one for another. That's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the new 300,000 number.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, that was my question on that. Does anybody else on the committee have any more questions on the purchase option page before we move on to the lease option page? All right, then, let's move on to the lease option page. Now, if we could, I have a couple of introductory questions I'd like to ask about the lease option. I wrote them down here, if I may. Oh, here they are. So. Do we have a quote yet for the lease that you projected?
So that truck, yeah, sure, that's the same.
You do have it.
Yeah, it's the one I gave you.
No, that's purchase.
No, it's the same.
Oh, it's the same?
The price of the truck, whether we lease it or we buy it, it's the same price of the truck.
What I mean is, can we ensure the stream of annual payments?
Now that we've taken the 350 and moved it down to 300,
Right.
we'll revisit the Republic National financing package
Okay,
by that amount.
Okay.
Get a new lease cost.
will be a new lease cost, and so that would be based on a quote.
Yeah, the lease
Got
quote
it, got
was for this.
Okay,
So obviously, smaller package. smaller
Good,
lease cost.
good.
So
Thank you.
that's-
Thank you, that answers that question. Now, my next question is the lease cost, I believe you said before, would include repairs, meaning that the company we're leasing from would be responsible for repairs, except for wear and tear.
Right, we're right stuff, yes.
Is that true?
Yep.
Okay, for 7 years, same term as okay, good. Now, my next question about repairs is who does those repairs? Let's say,
Under the warranty.
well, either one, if we buy a new with 7-year warranty included, or if we lease it and they're responsible, who does those repairs?
Same thing.
In both cases,
So what we're gonna do is wearable stuff.
right? Tire changes, tires,
Yeah,
yeah.
anything major, electronic, whatnot, it's going to the dealership.
So either way, lease versus purchase is apples and apples. Right. That's what I wanted to add. Okay. Let me think. Oh, trade-in. Let's say, this kind of gets a little bit of a piece of your question anyway, Jack, from 2 minutes ago. If we want to do the fleet, I'll call it a fleet lease, and you're going to lease, say, 3 dump trucks, if one of those is only a 2019 vintage, do we get trade-in value at the start of the lease for turning in the old truck? We get the same trade-in value when we buy that.
It's like I talked about with the grader, if we do a 10-year lease on a grader,
Right,
and in 7 years. Because we start out with zero equity, because our trade-in is worth nothing.
on the grader, our trade is worth, I think, I understand.
So if we start out and we're at $45,000 a year payment on the lease,
Right,
but it's a 10-year lease. And we said, hey, we want to get out of it before the warranty runs out, so we trade it. Well, what we're trading in now is only 6, 7 years old. There's a huge value on this,
right.
and then that other lease payment will drop down to 25.
So I asked a slightly different question. Think the 10-wheel dump truck, not the grader, whose trade-in value is zero. A 10-wheel dump truck, one of the ones listed that you want to replace, I think, is in 2019. So it's only 4 years old.
I think the 2019, we were not gonna get rid of that.
Oh, I see, I'm sorry.
No, the 2019 and 2021s, they're gonna stay.
All right,
Because
they wouldn't be in the initial lease. The fleet, under the fleet lease option.
Under the fleet lease option, I'm getting rid of my oldest vehicles.
All right, how
So
many,
the 2019,
how many dump trucks?
it would be 4 trucks total. that we-
You get rid of 4.
Yeah.
Then what's the, so I'm struggling to get my question out. One of those trucks. Let's say one of those has, what,
One of them will be, probably the newest one would be, number 7, 2018.
so let's pick that one, 2018,
Yeah.
it's 5 years old. My question is, does that truck have a trade-in value if we start to lease its replacement?
They all have some sort of value, right?
How much we get that trade-in value applied?
To that truck, so then, it would change how much you're asking to lease, right?
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah,
It would.
whatever we trade in, it will
Right.
come off the cost of that truck, so then we're asking for the less money.
Let me make up a number just so I can illustrate. Suppose that truck has $30,000 trade-in value.
Yep.
Don't we need to have carry in, put $30,000 trade-in that year as a credit coming back toward the cost? She does not have that in there, right?
Well, I know, if that's what it's worth now, if we wait a year.
No, the trade-in, what do you expect the trade-in will be worth? What you expect to you put that in the plan?
I don't know if you can, I think what we do is we figure out. If we get the price of the truck at $275,000.
Right,
And then when it comes time to get rid of them all, whatever they give us for a value, that's like your interest rate. I don't know what inflation is gonna be. I don't know what they're gonna give us for the truck.
I understand that.
And do we put it in now and have it be $15,000? And now we're off by 15 grand, right?
I hear you in a way, you're saying it's difficult to predict, on the other hand, to predict 0, I think it's not correct. We need to predict some sort of trade-in value on things like dump trucks.
There's there's Kevin, like the Kelly Blue Book that.
I don't think
that
that's.
that category.
That's smart. So I've got the vendor coming. We can try to get him. We can give us a price for those trucks. I mean, I know if you want to wait for a couple of weeks, I can get you a price.
Well, it's something we could put that in a couple of weeks would be
I
fine.
don't think it's a speaking concept to not put something, we
Right.
just don't know, you know,
We
that.
always have, by the way, it's not a brand new thought.
It's a function of what's the condition of the
Right.
trucks, the timeline for the new one.
And
the additional-
predicting what the market will be like a year from now, just, I understand all that.
But, you know, you could probably put in a placeholder, for the trade-in value.
At the moment, Terry does have a placeholder of 10,000 per year, every year. That's in the, that was, well, I was in the spreadsheet I looked at last week.
You could do that.
Maybe it should be adjusted somewhat. Maybe in a year when we're trading in a higher value 10-wheel dump truck that might not be as old, maybe it should be more than that.
Because here's the other thing you got, if you're taking your 275 and bringing it up to 300.
Right.
Wiggle room.
Right.
You got 10,000 in your potential trade-in. You've got some money on either side.
Right,
So
right.
in case the price goes up, if the value goes down, you can still probably accommodate between the two lines.
So there were 2 parts to the question. One part was if we go the lease route, do we still get the trade-in value?
Yes.
That was one question. Yeah. The other side of the question is, maybe in a couple of the years, the 10,000 number should be higher if it's a newer truck or something that we're gonna be trading in.
Potentially.
Potential. And I'd ask you to look at that, and I'd ask you to adjust on the trade-in line that Kerry has, adjust. You know, if you were there, it makes sense to bump the 10,000 up, something higher, because these are high-value vehicles. 10,000 is not much. At the moment, that's what Kerry has in the plan, is a placeholder. I'll call it 10,000 per year.
But wouldn't it be better to keep that traded value lower?
Oh, yes, I would suggest we be conservative,
You
yes,
got- Yeah, yeah.
yes.
Maybe your newer vehicle is a 12,000, your older vehicle is a 8,000 or 10,000.
The
Right,
truck we
so I
traded-
agree, Tom, we should be conservative in predicting trading advantage, yes.
The truck we traded in last year, we had 7,500.
Okay, got it.
And how old was that?
That was the most sick.
You see, it was quite old, and it was what, 6-wheel, so a 6-wheel 06, we got 7,500. It's not out of question to think we'll get at least 10 grand for a 10-wheel.
No, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
if not more.
Well, the first round, is gonna be, replacing the 6 wheelers with 10 wheelers.
Sure.
So once we start replacing 10 wheelers from 10 wheelers, there's a greater value. And once we start doing it, when there's still value left on the truck, that's.
So let's be clear, the first round, a minute ago, you said you would replace one.
Well, I'm on the lease
Okay.
purchase. If we start
Yeah.
doing the leases, we're gonna be multiple at a time.
Oh, well, that was gonna be one of the next questions, but before we do, we gotta, I think, a quick one.
Already told us, but just want to make sure we know. Thought about, is if you compare the lease purchase and the trading value is the same, then it's irrelevant,
Right,
because it's just. gonna-
agreed, but it needs to be in plan either way. Right.
You're like top capital budgeting, but, when we talked about trading value, I don't know if it applies anymore, that back in those days, there was what we called the salvage value, which basically means what is it worth for stuff. So I don't know if that, since there's so much stuff in cars nowadays, not worth a lot, because you got too much plastic and all of that other stuff.
Yeah.
Highway equipment gets here as a salvage car, but you know, it's not drivable like the grader, it doesn't have a salvage value.
Well, let's go to that.
We just making up the numbers, just for.
But you have to take-
Yeah,
But,
All right.
but just as a cautionary note, let's not use the term lease purchase, because we're not leasing these in order to purchase them at the end of the lease period.
No.
This is a straight lease.
exactly, it has to be a straight lease.
You gotta get rid of it. You gotta get rid of it.
I was gonna make a similar point, which is, if I recall from last year's research that both Ali and I did, these leases cannot have an opt-out option, or by state law, we can't go to the voters once for a multi-year commitment.
I'll double
To
check
pay
on
for
that for you, because I do know other municipalities, they do all that.
They do, all right,
For example, that Weathersfield, they always find a 10-year lease,
right?
and they get rid of their grader in 5 years, because they know on year 6.
So I would be happy to do that. I think that's great if you can do that. It would appeared last year that if we were gonna ask the voters once this March to approve a lease for X period of years, then we had to be sure that we were committed to X period of years. Now, Jack, if you find that we're wrong, that was wrong, I would love to know.
Weathersfield's Vermont, right?
Yeah.
We're not looking to do that.
Well, I mean, these guys got idea with the vendors, they sell to mock and stuff.
Just be aware.
So it's mostly an issue, because you're buying the vehicle, it doesn't matter, you purchase.
Right.
And you're leasing it, you got the trade in there, that's a separate transaction.
Right.
You've got Republic Bank, which is financing the package, so they're giving wherever the vendors are, right, money to buy it, right? So the only question for them is if there's an escape clause, the lender has an expectation of revenue and interest
Right.
over the life of the lease. So you have to just determine that there's a prepayment penalty.
That was not the question, though. The question that was raised last year was about the payer side, on our side, not the lender.
Right.
It was about whether we can go to the voters in March and say, we want to do this 7-year lease. And we will spend X amount of money, you're asking to vote on this once. If they vote yes, then you have to do it for 7 years. You can't bail out at 5.
Right.
Well, that was the question that was raised last year
Yeah,
by state law.
I personally never seen voters renege on a contract. So it just becomes part of the operating budget.
Yeah, it's part of the cost.
I understand that.
I'm not sure if that affects our planning. though.
You don't think so?
I don't think you can-
Well, I just wanted to caution you, the lease contracts are obtained if we go that route. That we've done properly. You're right, it doesn't affect our CIP plan.
Mhm.
Just a cautionary note, that they'll look into that, and be sure that whatever the lease contract terms are is okay with state law. That's really all I'm saying.
For Jack and Gary and this.
All right,
We're not trying to lease.
But again, escape clause. You know, if we terminate the lease early, there may be late repayment.
well, that too, yeah, I understand that. Yes,
Yes, different layer.
different question, but yes.
Yeah,
Well,
Maybe not.
we don't, yeah, but
Okay.
probably not in a significant way at the municipal level, because that's fundamentally based on the ability to collect taxes
oh,
and,
okay.
and service homes, so.
So if we could look at the lease option page for a second, the first thing that occurred to me is, under the purchase option, we would have bought 3 trucks next year. The lease option, I'm not exactly sure when, but I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines that would be leased. Would we really lease all 6 of those next year, or could we do 3, the same 3 next year and then another 3 the year after?
So in the purchase clause, to correct you, we have 2 trucks in a grader.
2 trucks and a grader, correct?
Yes. In the
Oh, I'm
lease-
sorry, you're right.
In the lease, we had 4 trucks, a grader and a backhoe.
Okay, gotcha. You're right, you're right.
Well,
That's good.
that's some of the decisions for this committee and the budget committee to make as to whether you tolerate the impact of leasing 60. That's just a decision that
Right.
somebody needs to make.
Well, same, to both points, to follow up the backhoe, let's use that as an example. If we were gonna purchase things, it looks like we would not purchase the backhoe next year. Are we saying that we're gonna lease, we need to lease it next year, or would that be the
It
same?
would- The backhoe needs significant work,
Right,
which we can definitely dime it in-house, which is bleeding us just like that. 1 of them 10-wheelers.
yeah,
You know, this lease plan puts us in, it gets us up to snuff. Right now, we're just spreading water.
so my question is, would we do all 6 next
Yeah,
year? I think your answer is yes.
Yeah.
If we were gonna go to the purchase option, we would only buy 3 of the 6 vehicles, I know they're all different types.
Yeah.
But we would limp along and buy the other 3 maybe the year after.
Correct.
Only because we didn't have enough cash to
Correct,
buy it all.
Exactly.
correct.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah,
There's
that-
also a discount at a certain level for
Yeah.
these things. So Karen, what is that percentage? You only mentioned.
There was- I don't know the percentage, but we got a break at $500,000, and then the second break is when you hit $1 million.
Right.
They're buying.
So it was my thought that 3 or 4 vehicles, not 6, are required to hit the $1 million break.
Well, is the break significant? I guess is what.
Good question.
I
Well,
don't have
it's
it memorized.
It's a financing thing, correct?
Yes, it's.
Yeah, better rate.
It's an
So
interest
like,
rate break.
like you can imagine, the more money you borrow, the better you probably have a potentially lower interest rate.
Mhm.
Right, so if you're gonna borrow $500,000, what they would do is refigure the interest rate on $500,000, if it's gonna go over $1 million, then they'll figure the longer term.
Right.
Interest rate for,
So having said that,
so I don't know what those are.
assuming we wanted to hit the $1 million threshold, it was my feeling that any 4 of these 6 would get us that high anyway. So that's not really the driver.
Well, no, I don't think that was the goal. That was just a perk.
That's a, yeah, yes, yes. But does it still make sense to lease all 6 beginning next year in terms of the impact on the general fund and the tax rates?
Well,
It seems like we'd be getting some pieces of equipment earlier than we would if we were gonna purchase them.
Oh, yeah,
well, sure, because it's cheaper.
right.
I mean, our operating mission is to get a fleet of vehicles for the town that are much better quality and more serviceable and less expensive to maintain as quickly as possible. And the way to do that is to lease.
Okay.
You don't have to do that. Nobody, some or other people were crazy against the lease, then you can nickel and dime your way.
Well,
advantage.
And there are other things besides just the purchase cost to consider. So, and Carrie Ann is working on compiling those numbers, but how much are we putting into repair? So if we're not purchasing this vehicle, but how much have we put into Daryl's truck this year?
All right.
So let's talk about that just for a second. And it's still on more? Okay. and
Which truck is that?
Just, and so then we have a grader that's out of commission, we're putting money into it, and how much of it's rent a grader? About $1,000 a day?
Yeah, our size, yeah.
And you're not seeing those costs. in
No,
there.
agreed.
We're still incurring all of those costs.
Your previous question, which truck was that?
Yeah, number 9,
Number 9?
that's the truck that, you know, this is what we talked about last year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's at the 10-year mark, and right now, we possibly need a turbo.
Got it.
For about another 10 grand.
And
So,
then
yeah,
another question, Guy, how many pieces of equipment are you servicing right now?
Right
And what is the average that you should be able to handle? So if we continue on that path, does that mean we haven't added staff, salaries, benefits? So those are other things to consider too. It's not just enough.
well, that was why I asked earlier, who does the repairs? And the answer was, under either of these plans, the repairs can be done by the dealers, whether it's lease or purchase. That was the answer I got 20 minutes ago.
Well, but
So
if-
that would not impact, what you just said.
Well, then that's still more that's on guys.
Right.
If we do a purchase of 3 vehicles, that's
Okay.
still more beat up, run down.
Wouldn't we purchase them according to this code, including the 7-year warranty? That would be the purchase option.
But then Guy still has an additional 3 that he's still, we're dumping.
All the older ones that we continue. to hold.
So,
Got it.
figure it, we got oil changes in the fleet.
Got it.
So,
I
what
see, I see
it-
the point.
But Steve Guy just said, at 55 pieces of equipment, you need to add 1.5 more mechanics in that shop to.
Understood that.
It is interesting.
It's a good point, that's a good point. That's
Just
a little-
Dale's truck on number 9, you
Yeah.
put enough in on repairs to fund the 1-year lease.
Yeah, I agree. I
It's
understand.
amazing.
Good, makes a good point, yeah.
It's a function of, I know that, it's a function of the age of the fleet. I mean, you bought a truck in 2022, and then you go back 3 or 4 years, and 10 years, 20 years, and longer. And since you bought more trucks, you have an aging fleet, that's a problem.
Yeah.
I think you had like 10 vehicles that weren't even able to run.
Yeah.
Correct.
They're just sitting there.
Right,
Right, if it were your personal vehicle, at a certain point, you would stop dumping money into. it
Right,
and
correct.
buying it. So, and
Either
these
buy or
are
lease it.
things that the general public doesn't necessarily like, maybe coming to the deliberative session or going to the deliberative.
Right,
So
right.
we're going to start having little segments of the select board meeting where we try to educate everyone and
Good.
have a Q and A and.
I have one more question about the lease option, which is, the lease option right now, plan shows leasing for dump trucks. Next year, probably next year, correct? Would the plan be perhaps to lease the other 2 when the time comes, when they age enough?
Yes.
Is that your thought?
That is a thought.
Okay. And by the way, by that time, we would release the 4 dump trucks next year, what, the backhoe and the grader, is that the thing? Yeah. So what I was wondering is, when the time comes to lease those other 2 dump trucks, when they get old enough or repairs are getting more expensive enough. Is there another piece of equipment that you would also lease at the same time, make another lease package kind of thing, you know? Nothing else makes sense?
Not at this time. It's gonna come down to 2 with what can be up with what is. You can buy something new and it can cost you, it can be always down, so you think
Right.
that. And so that depends. We may say, hey, that truck, I know it's only 4 years old, but it's just broke down every other day. It's just a lemon. So that would go on the block. So there would actually be 3, because what would happen is, a truck that we keep for a backup. We want to move that along. And then take one of the trucks that we release, and at the end of the lease. We'll see that,
Buy it.
buy it out, and it'll be a backup, because the problem is right now, any one of my trucks go down. It's down, there's nothing that can go on that road and replace that route until everybody else is done.
Yeah.
I mean, you're trying to take a 10-wheeler and put a pickup on that route, it just doesn't.
Not gonna work, yeah.
And we had 2 down the other day. 2 that were at the same time, and thankfully we're not plowing.
And now we're trying to get it inspected, and, Dale's is not just a triple, it's just like all. We could potentially really push over. 20 grand.
Okay. Does anybody else have any more questions about the lease option?
I do,
First, the committee.
I do. I don't quite understand why, if we purchase, we only need 3 vehicles. We can only buy 3 vehicles, but if we lease, we get 6. Now I understand why we can't either. Why we need that many lease
Right.
as when we don't need them if we purchase.
I believe you can cut that in minutes because you can't afford them. Right, we would like to buy six, but we don't have the money.
So the fleet is in terrible shape. Yeah.
Well, I said that over and over.
Yeah, yeah.
I understand.
The only way to get a decent fleet is to lease them out of lower the impact on the tax. Because it's not.
Because you want it right now.
Well,
Why can't 3 or 4 of these be deferred 1 year? So we're not leasing everything all at once and spread it out.
Because then we have those maintenance costs, like Bob was just saying, that's probably spent
In a
30,000 a year, this year, and even other. $1,000
But we were getting rid of the worst of the worst.
So in the purchasing, you're looking at 3 worst pieces.
Yeah.
But we have 3 other ones that are lingering, and you're gonna end up, if you wait a year, you're gonna end up breaking the bank just to keep them on the road.
Let me add to that for a second. 3 worst, but only one of those 3 is dump truck. The other
Well,
2 are.
The one that's the dump truck, and then the grader.
On the birch top, it's a pickup, a one-ton pickup and grader and 1 dump truck.
So it's a 10-wheel dump truck,
So-
a 1-ton dump truck, and a grader. That's
Right.
not a pickup.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So you gotta get rid of the pickup because that changes everything.
I'm sorry, it says 1 ton. I thought that was a
Yeah.
pickup.
No, it's a dump truck.
It's a small dump truck, okay.
Yeah.
I think it's smaller than dump truck.
Yeah, so.
Okay.
So if you were to purchase all of them, I mean, that's $900,000 right there.
I'm trying to come back to Tom's
Yeah.
question for a second and trying to help you here. So in the plan, if he was going to lease next year, he's saying that instead of lease, if we were gonna purchase, we only have enough money to purchase 1 dump truck. Big dump, 6 or 10 wheeler. Whereas if we lease with the same amount of money coming out of the town, we could lease 4 dump trucks. Is part of that package. And reduce maintenance costs, reduce the load on the mechanic, reduce road wear, improve efficiency by doing fewer trips and so on. For all the reasons stated earlier in the meeting, we'd like to begin leasing 4 dump trucks instead of just buying 1 of them next year. Now, one more thing was, to me, if we're leasing 4 dump trucks, if we were gonna purchase and keep 3, those 3 must have some trade-in value, back to my earlier line of questioning. And even if we start leasing them next year, if we can trade them in at a value that helps offset that additional lease cost a little bit, then it kind of makes sense to go to a plan to lease 4 next year, instead of buying only 1 and deferring the others, and living with the maintenance costs and the maintenance problems and the downtime, all the other problems we've heard about. So that's kind of what we're talking about here is buying 1 dump truck next year or leasing 4.
It's kind of.
That's the difference.
Kind of like the senior center roof. Half the roof is leaking. And, so you replace half the roof, now that half the roof that you didn't replace is leaking. And if it's done on both sides at the same time, you wouldn't have, you got this aged fleet. And you're never, I don't see this town ever having enough money to actually cash purchase all of the stuff that it needs, that just makes sense. And so as an economical benefit in the short term and the long term to every taxpayer, I think you ought to lease everything. Because it's a better, more economical way to go in a town that is budget sensitive and I'll say, cash poor. That's okay, Some towns, they don't want to do that because they can pay for all that stuff. I don't have a sense that Canaan is that town. Looking at the history of how long it takes you and how many years you keep stuff in the condition that it's in. So I'm trying to find a way to, and this is just counterbalancing the calls I get every week complaining about roads. So we're trying to find an economical quality solution that matches the economic tolerance of the community. So that's what this is all about. It isn't that we don't need six, and then we can get by three, if you need six and then some. So I see this as a multi-year plan to rebuild the fleet in the most economical way for tax sensitive citizens. So that's the bigger concept. It's, but you guys, and the budget committee, I want to get to make it.
Right. I'd like to add one dimension to what Jack just said. I agree with most of that, with one slight exception, that is, I see the fact that, I'll say we're in a hole. We're in a hole with an aging fleet, with a fleet that has a lot of repair problems and so on. And I don't see us having the cash anytime in the next couple of years to buy our way out of that hole. On the other hand, in the back of my mind, to me, long term, think 10, 15 years, leasing always costs more than purchasing. Why? Because there's interest costs for financing and there's profit for the leasing company built in the cost. So over 10 or 15 years, in my mind, leasing costs more money in grand total. That doesn't mean that this year or next year, you're gonna have money to buy what you need. So if you kind of balancing those two things, that, yeah, leasing does come with some, I'll call them hidden costs. On the other hand, you can get yourself out of the hole you're in, and if there are other savings, that's why I was really interested in hearing your explanation earlier. The other savings can offset those hidden costs.
Yeah, that's a perfectly logical and cogent way to look at it, because once you restore the quality of the fleet and you develop a new pattern of value trading, it's less expensive to buy it, because now you settled into good quality trade-ins and affordable.
Right, that's what I was thinking.
But you're not there yet.
We're not there.
You'll never hold to get yourself a respectable fleet. And it is almost sinful, if not negligent, to spend $50,000 to repair a vehicle. I mean, that's just absolutely wasteful, in my experience. But this is the decision that you guys. Oh, yeah, no, they can spend as much as they want.
Can I make a couple observations on,
If it's when we move it on.
I heard this many times from buses, is that Canyon has more miles of road than almost any other town of its size. And what I remember buses said it was close to 100 miles of road. And NTO doesn't have that. It is roughly the same size. So is that correct?
Yes.
So that's part of our problem, is that we have 4 miles of road per resident and most other towns, so that's the issue.
In the area, we're spread out.
In the area,
Like Enfield can get their plowing done in 2 hours.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
You can't do that. Where is this?
They also have more paved roads than.
Yes.
So they probably don't need a grader as much.
You've got,
My other point was also when we're thinking about, the mechanic cost, obviously, and leasing and whatever else we need to do to, get ourselves through. It's like when Bob was talking about Dale's truck being down, what does Dale do? I mean, if he doesn't have a truck to drive,
He goes home.
and we have to take it still, don't we?
Oh, he's gonna.
Does he have to?
Hopefully, I mean, what else you can have to do? Middle of the snowstorm. That's the thing. If it's the middle of the snowstorm, we don't have a backup truck.
Yeah.
This truck goes down.
Yeah,
What do you do? I mean, fortunately, we were able to last year with our 1 ton, just swap it with the guy in that for salt, but we still need to go help Dale, because now you're still putting a smaller truck through a bigger truck through, and it just doesn't hold water.
well, that's what I was, because I used to see, when I used to go to my mechanic, I used to see, my mechanic, I used to see a town mechanic, now, my mechanic, around, just standing around waiting for the police cruiser. Yeah, when he could be doing something else, so my point is that, are we not only spending money on the mechanic, and the parts and all of that, are we spending money on having a, highway employee, have to pay employees?
Right.
When he can't get it.
That's all part of the thing we talked about earlier. Yeah. Yep.
That should also be factored in as well.
It has been. It's all part of the reasoning why leasing for dump trucks is a good idea instead of just buying one.
And so under the lease plan that we have in place, when we think about proposing, what's the lease, annual lease amount?
Carrie Ann has that figured out, but it's going to improve somewhat based on the new quote today. So Carrie Ann will be working that out and showing it in the spreadsheet, right?
To what we possibly would avoid, in mechanics and other costs, and we take a direct comparison so that people can see that very easily. You know, if we set this down in the lease, they'll say, put it down in, mechanic costs.
Yeah, that's our plan, to say, you know, what we have done for rental repairs, all of that.
Thank you.
Right, that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one thing, that other thing, I think, it will help a lot. It will help.
So,
And that's something that we'll present at one of the select board meetings as well.
so if I may, well, the discussion we just had was item 4 on the agenda. The consideration of the alternative funding, the reasons why, and leasing 4 vehicles, 4 dumps, exception, buying one and all that. In my mind, that covers, agenda item number 4, unless anyone on the committee wants to bring up any more aspects of that. If not, I would like to offer a conclusion sort of to item 4. In my opinion, and I'm really gonna state this to get opinions from the other committee members and Jack especially. I believe I am now convinced that it looks like the leasing option is the better plan to proceed with. And to not drive Terry in crazy forever trying to maintain 2 plans. But perhaps we should proceed forward, sharpen our pencils, improve the numbers, get some trade-in values, reasonable ones, where they should be more than the 10,000 and so on. That's my opinion is I'm pretty well convinced that sounds like a good recommendation based on Bob's recommendations and his reasoning and Jack's recommendations as well with all of his experience. What does the rest of the committee think about that?
I have a question. On the lease option, the only expense provided for 24 is the Dodge number 3 1-ton. There's no lease payments listed there. So would we not make any lease payments in 24? Would there be?
It depends on where the note is placed. The lease payments might be in 24, right, guys?
It depends on the lead time.
It depends on the lead time of when the trucks could be delivered. Let's say if they can be delivered later in the year in 24, then I think these payments might begin then, yes.
Well,
We can't actually obligate ourselves to buy and lease to get some blessing from the town meeting in March. So the official order that we obligate the town to can't happen until after the voters pass the budget. So if there's a 6 or longer lead time for any piece of equipment, the first lease payment might actually not take place. It might take place in 2025.
but what if it does take place in 22? Where's the money come from?
It's a
It'll be in
separate,
the general budget.
yeah, it's gonna be a separate.
It will be
warrant.
in the general budget. It's not capital reserves.
The lease
Any
payments-
lease payments come from general budget.
We would run a separate warrant article for the total of the lease payment, and right now, with everything at the $350,000 dump truck quote. The lease payment came in at $335,000, so we would run the warrant article, that's the top of the line that the lease payment would be. When all the final numbers come in with the $275,000 quote, like that's gonna be less, but we'll already have the approval for the
Right.
warrant article to pay for the lease.
Let me,
So there'll be a warrant article funded.
there'll be one warrant article for a fleet option, for a fleet, lease, for a fleet lease approval by the voters. And it would have a grand total amount of money for that fleet lease off, for the fleet leasing, which would be somewhere near 300,000 based on the calculations. And the voters will be asked to approve leasing the fleet with one warrant article. Now, whether those payments need to begin later next year or early in the year after will depend on when the vehicles can be delivered by the dealers. But the warrant article will have been approved.
So you get, remember, there's a separation between the warrant article itself and the time you actually dispense the cash. So we get permission to obligate the town for the lease, and then the cash just gets dispensed in the normal course when the vehicles arrive and you take possession.
So then, is that a CIP thing then? Do we have money, do we have the unexpended leftover tax money from the
I think I
prior
can
year
answer that.
to
Yeah.
apply on those lease payments if they come in 24 or 25 or whenever? Is that still capital improvement money, or do
It's
we,
not capital
does it have to
improvement.
be a purchase?
It's general fund money. It's general fund money,
It's for capital.
the leasing. But, please give me 1 second, guys. Yes, to your point, Tom, it was a great one, that, which one is it, the Dodge number 3, I believe, that's shown at 150,000 next year? I want to answer your question.
Yeah.
You pointed out the 150
The
that
Dodge
shows the next year, right? So if you go down that column way down, you find that right now we have a capital reserve balance of $189,240.
Okay,
The answer to your question is the money for that number 3 truck is in the capital reserve bank account right now.
okay.
And we
I
will spend
understand-
most of it
I
for that truck.
understand the purchase. I'm okay with the purchase.
So
I'm asking about
now the
lease.
lease ones,
I don't
exactly.
know about the lease.
They would not come out of capital reserve. State law does not allow that.
The last one, back and forth on that
Once,
slide.
Well,
as,
Yeah, we talked about it.
I can't,
We need to talk about this. Well, I'm sorry that you don't value my opinion, but I do know what I'm talking about. And we talked about this at the last budget meeting, if I recall, Jack, if I just remembering. When we talked about the law and Mike Hanson agreed with me that I researched it, that the law has gone back and forth on whether you can take lease payments out of the capital reserve. I've seen some years where you can and some years you can't. So you need to talk to an attorney or someone at NHMA, the attorney here, to tell you whether that's the case or not, because we can argue about this all day long and not know. So we need to know
Right.
that.
so for right now, Tom, the answer is, right now, Carrie Ann is planning, put in a warrant article to get permission, as Jack just said, in March. But she's planning to build the amount of lease payments that would be needed into the general fund. Not to take it out of capital reserves, and we would spend most of the capital reserves for the few pieces of equipment that we're planning, that this plan shows we're gonna purchase. Like that number 3 truck. That would use the existing capital reserves, and the following year, there's a couple of small pieces of equipment, like there's $250,000 for, I believe, a loader. Shown in 2025, see that? So there are a few pieces of equipment. This does not say we will lease everything. This says we would lease 6 of the 15 or so pieces of equipment. And the others we would continue to buy, and we would be buying those using capital reserve accumulation as usual. But the lease payments, Terry is planning to build into the general fund. Does that answer your question?
Karen, you want to talk about that at all? Is there a difference if we lease the vehicles, have to fund it in the operating budget? Is that assisted because we have the liberty then of making fewer contributions to capital?
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to show by breaking out all the warrant articles on the bottom of
Right.
both the lease option and the purchase option. Like I did my best to break out what the warrant articles would have to be, so you could see that we would be contributing way less money to the highway equipment capital reserve, but we would still need to contribute to it.
But that money will go in the general fund instead,
The lease is gonna become part of the general fund.
right? That is Terry's current plan, to put money in the general fund budget to make the lease payments.
and not,
And the
not
capital
so
reserve-
much here,
Pardon?
not so much money here.
Not so much money here, but the amount of money that is here would go towards those few pieces of equipment that this plan shows we will purchase.
You don't have to put capital money in for your leases. Right?
Right.
So this whole page looks a little smaller because you're not leasing these, you don't have
Right.
cash in there. Instead, a lower amount of that money, all things stays equal, will just go into the operating budget. They're just moving it from one side of the ledger.
Yeah. Okay, that answers the, all right, good.
I have another question about.
We're running out of time now, Ellie. We have to end at 10 o'clock. Can you make it quick?
Yeah, because it's sort of point on the leases, I'm gonna ask it now, or I can ask it later. Is that when we talk about if there's a development value on any of these pieces of equipment, now, we, whatever many we wanna lease, is swapping. mean, the trade-in value on it.
We already talked about that earlier.
Yeah, well, I'm getting some.
Is that, if there is that, does it come off the first lease payment or does it get amortized over the lease? Does it reduce the entire lease value or does it get, do we take it off the first lease payment?
It reduces the purchase price.
I know, but does it get amortized over the whole lease or does we take off, do we take that amount off the first lease?
Well, it's money you're not spending on purchase, so you're that financing a lower.
It would reduce the monthly payments for the long term.
Well, no, it's not. I don't know. What can you imagine? That's a $300,000 truck to make it $20,000 better. I'm only financing $280 instead of $300.
Right, exactly, so that's my point, because if you trade in a car, you have, in other words, you spread it out, amortize, you spread it out over the life of the.
So the payments will be reduced, spread out,
So what like.
because you're financing. That's what you wanted. The reduction will be spread out over time. That's what it-
Off the first lease payment, that would sort of mitigate.
Yeah.
But I guess.
No, I don't believe it is that. No, the purchase price would come down and then that's the amount financed and the monthly payments would be lower for the full term. Okay. Looking at the agenda, we have an item here for, other business. I believe oh, I'm sorry, I didn't get the final. So when I asked what the committee thought about proceeding with the lease option as presented here. I had a question, we talked about it. I'm still curious, Sadie, what do you feel? Do you have an opinion whether we're ready to proceed down one road or the other?
I'm in favor of leasing.
And I am also in favor of leasing. What do you think now, Tom?
Okay,
Okay, so at this point, we believe that with the lease option is the best method to proceed. The reason I'm saying that is let's give Terry Ann and Bob the opportunity to, I'll say, sharpen their pencils on the lease option spreadsheet. You know, get better purchase prices, see if you can get the price held,
So
improve the trade-in values, things like that.
So in general, Karen, as we sit here today, I know the numbers will change a little bit, they'll get a little better. Can you tell the committee generally how much of a better deal is to lease from a financial point of view?
Yeah, I was breaking everything down to the cost per thousand
Right.
between the purchase and the lease option.
Right.
So what the purchase option does is we would have to cover the pieces that we would need to buy in 2024. The increase per thousand would be $1.28 per thousand, which equals $286 on our median home. But when you compare that to the lease option, the lease would keep that as a lower increase as $1 per thousand, and that would be a $223 a year impact on the median home. So the lease option really just lowers the increase over the next few years, where the purchase is gonna spike, and then in 3 or 4 years, we can decrease a little bit, because then we'll be in a purchasing plan. But still, for those first 4 years, it's a very high tax burden, 28 cents per thousand more than the lease option.
So you get twice as many vehicles for less money.
The less money for the next few years, yes.
Yeah. But he said, someplace that the tax rate with a purchase would spike, but then come down, whereas the lease would go up and stay up, it would not come back down. So you're spending more money. As you said, it's more
In the
expensive to
long
lease.
run. But in the next year's tax rate, this being lease option, see that $1?
I
That
understand.
compares to, you understand that?
I
Good,
understand.
good, all right. Okay, well, since you're,
But-
yeah,
But long term, it's gonna cost.
What we'll
agreed.
What we'll do is because I think he may already have it, the amount of interest that we pay over the 7-year lease period. So we can actually identify that.
And
Okay,
also,
notice
this-
because the interest you're not paying.
This also doesn't include any of what Bob mentioned about labor, the mechanics. How much.
Yeah, see.
how it's worked.
Right,
This is just looking at purchasing and leasing, not considering how much mowing and repairs we're gonna be dumping in.
Okay,
I understand.
yeah. And I think that's gonna be taken into account in the enumeration of savings that are expected. Other business,
Well, are we skipping the transfer station and bridges and all of that?
yeah, where do we stand on transfer station at? So we, transfer station, we can sign and all that.
Well, I'm gonna try to do something with the transfer station this year, we can mobilize the reserve. Because I do, have 40,000. Out of the budget. And we do have some ARPA funds. I think we can spend this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we had in the 2023 operating budget, there's $40,000 budgeted for capital outlay. I assumed that those were geared towards something. We haven't heard what they were being spent on, so we're thinking that's the transfer station money.
So I have a call, with DES Environmental Services today. Regarding kind of a redesign or the, transfer station. To both save some money and perhaps generate a little money from them we're not making now. And there's some physical, I mean, there's just some very shabby buildings and unsafe things in that.
The CIP point of view, will we know by the next meeting if we need to build some capital reserves in to fund whatever the redesign comes up with, or?
Will that 40,000 that's appropriated by the select board lapse if it isn't spent, or can we encumber it without we need a plan to encumber it? The obligation.
And that $40,000 capital outlay is part of the operating budget, so we would need to encumber it, but it's there to spend in 2023.
But I think to your answer, Claude, if we plan to do something with it in 24, again, we wouldn't put it into the capital reserve.
Yes.
Because then we couldn't do it like that.
Right, that's a good point. Yeah.
That's what I'm wondering. Do we need to put
No,
some
we
in the
don't.
capital reserve toward that?
No, we don't.
Okay,
Because whether it's ARPA or the current funds, it's.
Okay.
outside of it. That's a good point.
all right, that was really what I was wondering from the CIP point of view. Good,
Yeah.
good. All right, excellent. Any other business?
I just like to make a note that quote that I gave you for the truck. If you look at that, under remarks, stating you have 2 children back. Under remarks, right here.
Yeah.
Holy mackerel.
See,
You put it in there.
Holy cow.
This is why I say it's a lot more than, there is no salvage value in that sense. There's real value. Salvage value is kind of what you get if it was.
Yeah, scrap.
The scrap. Yeah, here, you'll get into this plan.
It's real numbers now.
Where you'll get potentially 110 to 130,000 in trading. That's what sets the stage when you get if you get on the other side of it, like in these programs, so you have a good start. Absolutely.
You can begin to turn it over for good value.
You could turn it over for good value and
Yeah.
return to purpose. Because the burden that he'll decline to save up all that money as well. Because
Right,
we've now had a tenfold increase in the trading values across the board.
Tom, I believe you had another item you wanted to bring up.
I did, under, other business. And that is, I would like for the committee to adopt a policy that public comments and questions be deferred until the end of the meeting. And that we not be, that our deliberations, our considerations not be interrupted during the course of the meeting by the public, unless we specifically invite them or we specifically grant them permission to speak. I think that interruption by the public really impacts the ability of the committee to proceed in their discussion. And I strongly object to members of the public speaking out and interrupting the meeting. So I would like to adopt that policy and authorize the chairman to, not recognize people who want to speak unless they're invited in some way.
Well, next, please, Sadie.
I haven't given it much thought. I think in a lot of meetings, there is a section for public comment. And I've seen that in the agenda in many formal meetings, so I'm not opposed to it. But I mean, we need to give the opportunity for public comment questions. But if we limit it to one area, that's, and we have it more structured, I think the meetings could be more structured and stay on task overall, not just for the public, I think in general.
I
So,
just understand your comment. I think you're agreeing with Tom that public comment at the end of the meeting would be more appropriate. Is that what you just said? Or not?
yeah, I'm fine with that.
Jack, I appreciate your comments and observations.
That's-
Based on your experience,
It's a committee decision. I think that the town. in
give us
general,
some advice, please.
in all meetings, I think you're much more open to whether it's the select board meeting or any other meeting, but a lot of people just chiming in. It is unusual to get that much of basically a public recall. Is it a bad thing? I'm not sure. You guys get to decide that.
You're already
I-
strong advice one way or the other.
Well, many communities structure it so that they can carry out the business, and you either have a public comment time at the beginning or. But I've never really seen kind of the ongoing midstream commentary from communities, not just this.
It's not normal in most municipalities.
No, but it doesn't mean that's the, your community, you guys get to interact with
Right.
whatever
Mhm.
way you establish.
Right.
Yeah.
So, to chime in with my opinion, I'm on the fence, frankly. I hear what Tom is saying. He is correct that we can be subject to disruption and maybe become less efficient. And disrupt committees proceedings. On the other hand, I have found on several occasions, the public input during the meeting at a particular point on a particular topic to be helpful and useful. I can see both sides of that, I really can.
I think
And I'm struggling with how I would vote on that if you say we were to take a vote.
okay, so then Tom can make a motion and we'll vote on it and we'll see. That's how we.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I move that the committee adopt a policy that restricts public comments and questions to the end of the meeting unless the chairman either invites the public commentary unless,
That's a good time.
I think that's good.
I'll second it.
but what this does, Claude, this puts, as long as you're chair or whoever is the chair, that puts the burden on you to control it. And I wish you would. At the risk of being frank.
Please, be frank. Okay. That's the motion. Sadie seconded, just a second, let me write that down.
Now we vote.
Now we vote, but bear with me 1 second, because as I described earlier, I am on the fence. I'm not sure whether I would vote for or against. Since there are 3 of us, it's gonna make the decision. Oh, no, maybe not, I'm sorry, maybe not.
Until you vote.
So I'm trying to decide if I wanna vote for or against. I can see advantages both ways.
Then you may have to revisit the same agenda repeatedly over and over. You wait till towards the end.
Okay, so you're saying if the public's question, if a question arises from the public or a point of advice at the end, we might have to revisit.
repeat it
previous
over
cycle.
and over.
What you do is you generally take everything under
Yep.
and not, you don't have to engage in every.
Every topic.
Right. Your obligation is to do your work.
So, I guess I'm deciding how I'm gonna vote. I'll briefly explain why, and that is. I would be willing to try Tom's suggestion, see how it works out. I'm be willing to vote for it, and knowing that, the chairman would have the option to invite public comment on a particular point where needed, where important. But it might be meeting more efficient.
You're all set with that?
Thank you, we're all set. Thank you, Tom. And we're about to wrap. Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Gunn.
Yeah.
All right, so all in favor of Tom's?
This is the second meeting we passed out pamphlets, and I've not got a copy. The next time, please bring those copies for everybody. I will.
Hey.
I was in a hurry and I hit the third button and it came and I will get you a copy. Okay. Yeah.
He passed out one sheet, I'll get you a copy.
Yeah.
I'll get you a copy. Yeah. Oh, okay, but good point. All in favor of Tom's motion? Aye. We didn't vote yet. Aye.
Are we voting?
Yes.
And the question is,
You're.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so, all in favor? I will reflect that in the minutes, and do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah, so-
Quick run.
All right. Second.
Yeah, he did.
All in favor?
What was in favor? Opposed.
Stay seated.
Coming up with Zoom.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So we actually broadcast this now.